Hi, I'm Mark Dias, and welcome back to Advance Wars. This time, I'll actually have a topic to talk about, so that way I don't just say, like, oh, move here, yeah, go, do this, yeah. So, I've been reading a lot of game development things, and first off, as a side note, I know, you're a dick, as playing a Nintendo game, I should say something about it, which is, you know, Nintendo is good with their games. Like, the only problem I have is that they're all really clones of each other, and I understand, like, taking a product and making it better. That was really stupid. Like, when you take a product and make it better, I understand. Like, you know, you improve on it, so that way you don't have Devil May Cry syndrome, where you're like, oh, we made Devil May Cry 1, which was an amazing, like, breakthrough game that was just one of those things that, you know, will be forever in video game infamy. Is it going to rain on all my turns? But then you have Devil May Cry 2, which was a complete and total disaster, which was probably, like, on my list of, like, worst sequels ever, which, really, the way you look at it in Devil May Cry, it's, even odd numbers are good, even numbers are bad. That's pretty much the way I look at that franchise. But Nintendo, you know, they Legend of Zelda and Mario, and my constant problem with them is they're all clones of each other. Like, this game has how many sequels, iterations, whatever you want to call them. And they're all good, and they add little tweaks that make them a little bit better, but inherently it's still the same game. Like, if you're sick of the game because you played it, you know, X many of times, that's the reason why sequels don't always work out, because people got everything they wanted from the first one. And then there are other disasters where they move something to handheld and it's not as good, or they next-gen it, like the new Metroid that recently came out, whatever, other Second Samus, or whatever the fuck it's called. Which just isn't very good. I know some people are like, oh, I love that game! No, actually, you wait there. But, you know, you build on the previous premise, which is understandable, but then you have Metroid, where it stayed on Game Boy, and they were absolutely amazing. And Castlevania that keeps pumping them out, and a lot of these games where, if you're sick of the gameplay or don't like the gameplay style, the sequel isn't going to interest you, and you don't feel like you've done anything new. And you haven't evolved as a game, so to speak. Which is very true, especially with Nintendo. They're, like, rife with that. Which is unfortunate. But I mean, granted, it's a tactic that has served them well, but at the same time, Jesus Christ, I think that it hurts them in the long run, and that's the reason why they usually have big booms. Like, GameCube had a big boom when it came out, and then slowly died. Because people think, like, oh, like, I'm getting a next-gen console, it's going to be amazing. And they play it, and they're like, oh my god, could you believe how amazing these games were, except for Luigi's Mansion. And so they kind of, I guess, deviate is the best word, from their original game to try to make something new and inventive. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And so I was reading all these game development things, just taking an interest in them, because I love video games, so why not learn about how they're made? But the biggest problem is that the guy who wrote it is obviously a moron, and has a very limited knowledge of video games, let alone... He honestly seems like he masturbates to Xbox games. Like, I don't mean to start a console war about stuff or start an argument about that kind of stuff, but it's like he constantly quoted the game Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks, which was fucking terrible. And it was filled with bugs and had little to no solid gameplay value. Like, I played it. I played a good portion of it. It's like Mortal Kombat Mythologies. Neck kicks. Neck kicks kill everything. That's a rule. If you jump kick someone in the neck, you will always win. Except for one boss where you have to constantly sweep kick him. But that's besides the point. The point is that these games often end up kind of regurgitating themselves, and in some ways it's good, in some ways it's very bad. But this development guy, in consoles, there has always been kind of a jump, and usually it's a twofold jump. Oh, well, there we go. So you have this twofold jump. Look how happy he is. Like 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit, 128-bit, and I don't know the calculation for the next one off the top of my head. Anyway, so, and you also had like 4-bit games and earlier consoles. I think 4-bit was the lowest that you could possibly have, and I think that was old PC games, like old IBM games, like Number Munchers and Qbert and stuff. I don't know if they were true 8-bit or not. I'm not an expert on that. But it was really amazing that he's like, examples of 32-bit. And, ooh, gray hen. Yay, I'm no longer a rat. So, he said, a perfect example of a 32-bit game is Mario 64. Are you serious? Like, Mario 64. As in, for the Nintendo 64, which was a 64-bit system. Like, ah, interesting. But anyway, so it was kind of embarrassing to see him do that, and he said that, what was it, God of War was a 128 game, and it's not a 128 game because it's for PS2, and PS2 was a, what, 246? Something like that, I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. But it wasn't a 128-bit game. But he seemed to really drive this point that it was a 128 game. Oh, shit. So, yeah, and it really, really bothered me that this person obviously was not knowledgeable about video games, but kept making these kind of drawn excuses about things, and like, yeah, like some of the things he was talking about were, you know, like things that you'd expect from video games, but it was very like, sure, that's the way it is, kind of thing. Like, I just kind of wanted to pat him on the head and be like, yeah, that's, exactly, that's just the way it happens. But, yeah, it was kind of an embarrassing thing to hear on like from something that's supposed to be like a college-level professional material. And it was really kind of, as a gamer, I don't actually, fuck you. I almost feel like my intelligence was insulted, because like if you're not into video games, you may not understand the ramifications of teaching someone bad video game knowledge. And that's the thing, is like, it's one of those things where I'm just like, Like, I just want to do the Jackie Chan head when Jackie Chan face, like, every time he says something really stupid. That's a lot of shit. But again, I can't, because it's, you know, obviously not my book, but it's one of those things where it's just like, oh shit. Shit. I fucked that one up. I should have moved my sub the other way. But just reading it is just like, it infuriates me that like someone out there is going to get deceived by this person who doesn't know what he's talking about with video games, and oof, God, I'm guessing. They think it's all like, it's okay to teach people that, oh, this is the way video games work. And I often mention things like, he mentioned Def Jam Vendetta as one of those influential games in like a PS2 Xbox library. And I was just like, what? Like, that's craziness. Like, I've never heard of someone who's like, you know what was a great classic game? Def Jam Vendetta. Like, those words have never been uttered. Fuck, this guy's an addiction. Oh great, now he's gonna do Tsunami next turn. Take that guy out real quick. These subs are gonna fuck with that, though. So, I don't know, it just... And, like, a lot of the points he was making in games, like, didn't... I won't say didn't make much sense, but weren't coherent. Yeah, he can't hit subs. Tough decisions. He's got a sub out there, so I should probably take his battleship down a peg. So, as for anything, it was like, I felt like, as a gamer, if you're going to, like, talk about something, especially video game related, you really should be very knowledgeable on the subject. I think that's just, I mean, granted that's like common goddamn sense, but like, I guess for this guy, it just really isn't common sense to think that this is how, like, this is the way video games work, so I'm going to teach it like this is how video games work. And like, he brought in people in his book to like talk about other things in it, which was like interesting and all, but like, seeing one development side of something isn't always the right side, if you get what I mean. Like, it's like, if you work for a studio, you know, granted you are like somebody's bitch, but you're not always making the games that you want to make. So you're essentially like working for someone to create something, but it might not be something that you're even remotely interested in, but you're doing it because you need money, and that money is how the world works. And so it's kind of silly to have all this, all these extra people talking when they're not really the people who are necessarily, like, when you're talking about game design, you want to talk to game designers, and they were asking, like, lead programmer. But, like, in my opinion, really, lead programmers aren't necessarily, like, the backbone of the video game industry, so to speak. I find it more fascinating when you have, like, talks from, say, there we go. Can I hit him, or can I hit him? Let's hit him. I think he joined units. But, sorry, I get, like, hypnotized by this game. No, you just stay back for a moment. I'll also repair what I have left. But, anyway, so, like, me personally, I just felt, like, more embarrassed for the guy who wrote it, because it's, if you're writing about, like, development and all these important points of games, and you're really trying hard to, you know, show someone what a gaming is like if basically you're speaking a different language to someone, you want them to understand what you're saying, and giving someone, like, I mean, it's like when people teach English to foreign people, they always teach them curse words first. Like, this person's effectively doing the same thing, but with video games, he's teaching them stupidity first, and not, like, common video game sense. Like, the Super Mario 64 thing, like, bothered me so much that it was, like, I wanted to, like, rage letter onto the guy who wrote it, you know, and be like, what the fuck is your problem? Are you some kind of moron? And I don't know. When it comes to video game development, it's one of those things where if you keep teaching bad things, we're going to keep having bad games, and we're going to be playing, you know, Def Jam Vendetta, because people are going to assume that Def Jam Vendetta was some sort of breakthrough title, which it was in no way, shape, or form. Jesus Christ. You go there. No, just wait. I don't know how you're supposed to get through this mission. Like, Drake with super-powered ships and all this kind of shit. Fuck, man. I mean, I suppose I could take my battleship around the other way, but sooner or later he'll get found out. I mean, that's just a given. And, like, battleships have such range. I don't understand how to do this battle. Granted, I was talking all the way through it. But, like, oh, I guess I could take the lander and put it somewhere else. That might be a better idea. Just take the lander and push it all the way up there. And their headquarters are all the way down there, so I'm not getting... Okay. I'm just gonna restart this. Now that I know what I'm doing... And, like, it's weird because he basically said, like, yes, I know. Yeah, don't care. I always hate how Nintendo keeps extra long screens. And I hate how you can't skip dialogue. But they talked about, you know, how you deal with flow in games and whether you should, you know, make it harder or make the story better and all this. And he basically said, like, you should just settle on making either a good story, good gameplay, or... No, actually... No, he's terrible with ranged combat. And his repair will come in handy. Anyway, so it basically became like a shit fest of retardedness, reading that. And telling people that, like, you should just accept the subpar in video games is what's creating this kind of Call of Duty crap. Shut the hell up! Thank you. God, no, you never shut your damn mouth. So... I've always kind of, like... I've always hated that idea that, like, you have to make a video game a certain way, or you have to, you know, just, like, oh, well, we can't afford to do a story, so we're just not going to bother. Like, I think that when you stop trying, it's what's killing things. I mean, that's what's happening in Hollywood, is that people just gave up trying, like, a year ago. Well, actually, like, 3 years ago. And just haven't made anything better since. And that's, like, the part that pains me, is it's like, why do you... I don't want to say, like, struggle against, but, like, why do you create crap and assume that it's okay to just keep putting out crappy movies and crappy shows and crappy all sorts of stuff? So, if you start accepting that as a reality in video games, that's how you end up with Def Jam Vendetta. And I'm going to keep bringing that up, Def Jam Vendetta, because it's a piece of shit. And the more and more we move towards this, the less and less I like games. Most people who made games in the beginning weren't people just looking out for money. Most of them did it because they thought it was fun. And they enjoyed video games, and they enjoyed playing video games themselves. I'm always distressed at how many people go into video games and are like animation majors or, you know, film writing, you know, something other than video games. And that's like, that astounds me. Why would you go into something you don't know anything about? Like, I understand in some lights, yes, you want to make something new, or you're interested in it, but you don't know how to get to that next step, so to speak. And there's a difference between not knowing and wanting to know, or you play video games and you just want to know how to make them. But a lot of these are just, like, when he talked about it, it just seems like plain ignorance. Just really just didn't know any better. And, it's sad that, like, that was kind of his excuse for that kind of stuff. Like, oh, well, I don't really know. If I can take out some of his naval units, I can just leave them to float at sea until they're ready to go. But, looking into, like, other video game stuff, like, there are some people who put out some very, like, eloquent articles about video games and their ideas and constructions and how we can make new games that are good games. And that's essentially, like, what I think is important, is that we keep focusing on taking old elements like these and put them into newer games and make them better, and not just crappy rehashes or Hollywood rewrite kind of shit. Like, stuff that people would actually be interested in. I'm just gonna rise him for right now. Because, like, there's only so many God of War stories that you can really do. There's only so many. By the way, you can cheat with his Tsunami, and you can see stuff that's invisible, or in hiding. But anyway, so really, when you learn from the past, especially with anything you do, even more so with video games, I think, but and movies, is that there's a focus to really, like, make a good game. And I think that a lot of people at some point just kind of stopped trying to make a really solid video game. I don't think I can hit him. Damn it, I can't go back. Whatever. And that's really what I love to, like, look after, is that kind of stuff. Sorry, I'm kind of half rambling. I'm trying to think of what I should do. Just try to do as much damage as I can. probably should have done that first. Probably would have done a little more damage, but... But anyway, so it just astounds me how many people write these stupid articles about stuff, and how many people write these really intelligent, eloquent articles that really focus on what's needed in the video game industry and what's wanted, and the real big difference between the two. And I think a lot of people don't bother talking about the difference between the two, which, you know, it's like potato chips, you know. You want them, but you don't necessarily need them. And I think it's ridiculous that everyone assumes that anything anybody wants is greasy, nasty potato chips. Like, that's just silly. But there's also this, like... video games are pretty straightforward with everything they have. Like, let's just put that out there. Video games are as straightforward as you get when it comes to most things. He's gonna be found out next turn. Might as well do some damage. That might be all be a trap. Let's quick save and find out. Even though this probably isn't the best place to quick save, but I've done fairly well for myself. Yeah, let's waste as much fuel as possible. And that should hopefully distract him for a turn, and then I can hit up one of their battleships and run. So, anyway, my larger point of it is I can't stand that some people don't seem to know what they're talking about with video games, but for some reason they're writing college materials, you know, materials that are more suited for a learning experience. But even when common sense stops prevailing and they're talking about things that they really have no idea what they're talking about, and just seeing it bothers me. Like, I would rather sit down to like a 6-hour nerd out seminar with someone like Adrian Carmack or something like that, rambling on and on about video games and polygon count and like reference size and charts and stuff, than listen to some guy who says that Super Mario 64 is a 32-bit game. And that's like just common sense prevails there. You know, I just don't, I can't, it almost gave me a stroke listening to it. And then they talk about dynamic systems in games and how they've changed, but they avoid really powerful games. And I'm sure some of it has to do with rights and licensing and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But most educational materials, you don't have to worry about that stuff because you're, you know, writing an article. And unless you're bad-mouthing someone, I don't think they'll be adverse to saying you have a good video game. But anyway, that's besides the point. The real point here is that it looks bad on people that say stuff like that and don't really have any clue. And it just, I don't know, something about it like fundamentally bothered me. So, I don't know. That's pretty much all I can say about that. Huh, that was surprising. How about you stand right there? Good. And anyway, it was just kind of surprising to me, and it really, like, put me off. It's kind of like reading old strategy guides, how sometimes they just say stuff that's just totally not helpful. And you're like, what the fuck, man? Come on. So, I don't know. Alright, I don't see anything ahead, which is good news. Ugh, Windows. But actually, I have to pause it for a moment, so I'll be right back. Okay. So, while I was out doing something, I decided to talk about something kind of strange. But it's the right kind of strange. A long time ago, I used to work with this guy, Delante, who, I know, I shouldn't use real names, but he was a really cool dude, and it was really nice working for him, because he was like the right mix of boss, and he wasn't like a dick, and he really, like, I don't know, I guess to say he, like, actually cared about his job and the things he did in just the right way. Oh, yes. And, whenever I was working with him, it was always, like, a real joy to kind of be like, oh, I'm working with Delante tonight? Awesome. Goodbye, Battleship. And, so, he was always the right amount of serious, where I didn't, like, you know, I didn't feel like I was, like, being slave-driven or anything like that. So, while working with him, I, made a joke, because he's, you know, older, and, he was born in the late 70s, I was born in the early 80s. So I made a joke, and I said, you know, someday, on the radio, you're going to hear, on a classic radio station, you're going to hear I Like Big Butts by Sir Mix-a-Lot. And he stopped for a second, and stared. And it just thought, like, oh, good lord. That's true. And he was, like, horrified for the moment. And, I laughed, of course. And then I was thinking about it a minute ago. Okay. So anyway, I was thinking about it, and, you know, someday, like how people now are saying, like, certain games are classic games or whatever, someday a game like Def Jam Vendetta will be considered a classic game. People are like, oh my god, I remember that game. That game was so awesome. That is a frightening, frightening thing to think about. And it, really, in the Sega Genesis era, and, you know, Nintendo and all of them, and even into the Super Nintendo and early PlayStation 1, there wasn't so much of that where you'd shudder at the thought of, you know, do I really want him versus Evil? No. Oh, they each have a different battle. Interesting. Let's have Sammy. That's kind of interesting, the way they split up the battles. But anyway, so, harrying us, I mean harassing us, it was just weird thinking about the fact that Def Jam Vendetta may at some point be considered a classic game. And that is kind of creepy. I mean, most of the games that I grew up with are now classic games. And it is funny that they're still, like, playable by standards, but, like, I've tried to play some games that are older games, and I just, like, I want to die. Like, I'm just like, how did I like this game? This game is goddamn terrible. And I don't know, I've just been like thinking about that and how weird that is. But I don't know. I don't know what made me think of it, but well, I do know what made me think of it, but down button. Why? Fuck. Did my controller just die or something? Hold on. Alright. Alright, hold on. Okay, I don't know what was going on there, but it's working again. It's really kind of confusing. I, like, checked all my settings and stuff, and it was fine, so I don't know. Strange. Anyway. But, I don't know, I had to reset everything. See, when I do that, it locks up. Yeah, the game is actually what's locking up. Weird. Oh well, I'm gonna try to fix this and figure a couple things out, and I'll do that in the next episode of Let's Play Advance Wars version 1.1 with me, Morak Dies. See you later.